Hi, this is Kelly with Hues Arts, and today I'm going to take you through the steps to make this fun beach scene card using Hues Arts stamps and inks. This stamp set is called Color Layering Waves, and it consists of 3 stamps or layers that make up the water, and each will be stamped in a different color of ink. These stamps require precise alignment, so I'm going to use the MISTI stamping tool to get the best results. First, position the watercolor paper in the MISTI. I'm using one of the MISTI Creative Corner pieces in the upper right corner to allow my stamping to go off the edge of the paper. If I just place my cardstock in the corner against the black ruler edge, my stamping will not go from edge to edge. So I'll make sure it's secure in the corner and then use the included bar magnet to keep my paper in place. Then I'll grab the solid layer stamp, which will be the bottom layer, and line it up on the cardstock. Close the lid of the MISTI to pick up your stamp, and then ink it up with Pool Party Reactive ink. To stamp, close the door of the MISTI and apply pressure to make sure the ink is transferred. One of the great things about the MISTI is that you can stamp an image multiple times and it will be perfectly lined up each time. I'm going to do this with each layer of the water, which will just give me a more solid stamped image with better ink coverage. Now we're ready for the second layer of our water, and I'll just line that up over the first layer and then ink it up using Blue Raspberry Reactive ink. This is just a slightly darker shade of the first ink that I used. With this layer, you'll begin to see the waves of the water being formed. And since it's so easy to do, I almost always find myself double stamping images when using the MISTI. And finally, we'll grab the last stamp layer, line it up, and stamp using Blue Hawaii Reactive ink. It's always fun to play with different ink color combinations with these color layering stamps. You can completely change the look of the image just by your color choices. Now that the water is done, we're going to create the sand using watercolor paints. I've decided to use a pearlescent gold paint that will create some fun shine to the card. I'm using a water brush to do my painting, but you can also just use a regular paintbrush and water. I'm leaving the paint a little splotchy on purpose, so when it dries, it has a more realistic sand look. Next, create the sky using the same Blue Hawaii ink we used before. Just rub some ink on a non-porous surface such as a craft sheet or laminated piece of paper and spritz with water. Paint the sky being careful not to overlap the waves we previously stamped. Once the background is done, you can use a heat tool to dry the painting before moving on to the next step. Now use the Sea and Sky stamp set to stamp some elements to the beach scene. Once again, I'll be using the MISTI for my stamping, but you can also use a clear acrylic block. Use a piece of washi tape to mask off the water, then position your image and stamp using black ink. This image is actually a cloud from the stamp set, but I'm using it to create an island out in the ocean. Then repeat this process with the palm tree and the sentiment image. And remember, you can always double stamp if you didn't get a good impression the first time. Also, when using the MISTI, if your cardstock happens to shift when you pick up the lid of the MISTI, you can easily just secure it back into the corner with your magnet and your stamp will still be lined up perfectly. Now let's create some white clouds in the sky. Since I'm going to be doing some heat embossing, I'm prepping my paper with an anti-static powder bag. I'm placing my clouds where I want them, and then I'm going to stamp them using Hues Arts Watermark and Embossing ink. This is a sticky, clear ink that allows embossing powder to stick where the image is stamped. Sprinkle on some white embossing powder and then heat set it with your heat tool. To assemble the card, I'm using a piece of white craft foam and double-sided adhesive to adhere my panel so it's popped up on my card base. Using the craft foam also helps smooth out your cardstock if there was any warping due to the watercoloring. And that's it. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed learning about using the MISTI stamping tool with color layering stamps.